So last year I came over to the Isle of Man Motor Museum and I did a few very brief videos with Darren Cunningham, one of the co-founders and directors of the museum. And one of those short videos I did was on the Monica, because Darren is very, very lucky and has 3 of them, including this prototype number 1. Unsurprisingly, our taster video left you wanting more, and you certainly want to find out much more about the 3 cars in the collection. So we're going to take a look now at the 3 cars, which are prototype number 1, prototype number 2, and car number 6, which was never finished. So we'll go through those in sequence. Now, a quick recap of the Monica story. It all started with a French industrialist called Jean Tastevin, and he'd made a load of money through selling rolling stock for the railways. And he decided that he would get into the luxury car business because Facel Vega had bitten the dust in 1964. He rather regretted that. He thought that the French should have something rather luxurious to offer wealthy industrialists like him. So he founded his own company. And that project started in October 1966. And it was called the Monica. The Monica named after his wife, Monica. Wouldn't it be great if she'd been called Brenda or Gladys or something like that? Driver Gladys.
It's something.
Driver Brenda. That'd be wonderful. So anyway, he founded Monica, or Automobile Monica, and brought in Chris Lawrence to design his luxury kind of sporting saloon. But Chris Lawrence was a man of many talents and decided that he wasn't going to just do the design, he should get involved in the engineering as well. So he ended up being kind of a one-stop shop, and he was involved in the design and the engineering of the car as a whole. So the first car was this one, and originally he was going to have Triumph power.
Just one small thing, Jean Tastevin's wife was, the company was named after her. Her name was Monique though. And they've used the English translation. Which is fair enough. Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of powering these machines, initially they were looking at Triumph engines, 4-cylinder and 6 cylinders, but they decided fairly rapidly, and before any had ever been put into any chassis, that they wouldn't have the power and give the performance that they needed for this sports saloon. So they went to Ted Martin, who designed a relatively small capacity V8 engine. We have one here for car number 2 behind us, and that's what they ended up using in the first sort of 5, 6, 7 cars that were made. This is as we said, this is number 1. This is a 3-litre version of that engine. Car number 2 behind has a 3.5-litre version.
And this car is up and running?
Yes. Yep. We've restored this. It was pretty much a wreck when we got it. So in a lot of time to figure out where everything came from. There's some sort of very prototype details on it, so we've kept them, but it has made it a bit more challenging. There's sort of parts bin specials here as well.
It's interesting going around cars like this, because I can see we've got Jaguar type indicators there. You told me that they're panhard headlights, which you can see it as soon as you say that, but otherwise much head scratching. Where did those come from?
Yeah, well, a couple of years head scratching for us to try and find a set of headlights for it. Yeah.
Volkswagen bumpers?
Yeah, split screen camper bumpers are on this.
I noticed Triumph Herald / Vitesse bonnet catches, because it's a pop forward bonnet. Any more intriguing
There's Renault rear lights. The front seats were out of a Humber. I think there's Volkswagen Beetle fuel flaps and door handles. So really, they were just grabbing whatever they had and could get hold of. And this car was built by Maurice Gom. That was the coach builders who put this one together.
Steel bodied?
Alley bodied on this one.
Right. Including the bonnet?
Yeah. The prototypes were alley. And then the production cars from numbers 8 on and 9 on. Again, one of the things with Monica is there's some inconsistencies in the histories, as we mentioned. So numbers of cars, some were renumbered, some have been re-identified. They seem to all swap number plates at various times, all the press cars that is, or the prototype cars. So yeah, the quote production cars were steel bodied.
And bearing in mind we're only on car number 1, we've got 2 more to go. It's very easy to want to tell the whole story while we're talking with car number 1. But of course the thing is that there were only 35 or so of these made. That, yeah. Most of which were prototypes. Yeah. Only about 10 customer cars.
Yeah, I've heard 22 prototypes in total, and 10, as you said, about 10 customers. But even then, I don't think there was probably any 2 that were really the same. They seemed to little tweaks to headlights and indicators, all sorts as they were going along, and the interiors kept changing.
So it's powered by a Ted Martin 3-litre V8.
Yes.
Which, what sort of power output would that have been? Do we know? Was there an official
I don't
rating on
know.
it?
I don't know if there was. There's got a fun little story on that, in that one of the issues that led to them not using the Martin V8 for the production cars was who was going to build it. And they went to Rolls-Royce. And Rolls-Royce were willing to build it, but they couldn't guarantee the power output because it wasn't one of their designs. So that ended up, Jean Tastevin was a bit unsure about having a small volume make or a small volume engine, so they went and started looking elsewhere for
the irony
for
being,
power.
of course, Rolls-Royce never disclosed their power outputs anyway.
Of course.
They always said merely adequate.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, here's a view that not many people get to see. Under the bonnet of prototype number 1, which is obviously unique in, well, not in every way, because car number 2 shares some of what's here.
Yeah.
What are we looking at? So we've got a Ted Martin 3-litre V8.
Correct, yeah.
Which, is this the only 3-litre V8?
It was the only 3-litre that went into a Monaca.
Right,
There
okay.
were other Martin engines, and there was a smaller 2.8-litre version not used in the Monaca project.
Okay, so we've got a rather neat looking steering linkage there, which looks a bit lashed up.
Yep.
And then we've got obviously a pretty much unique, I hate to use that term, but ultra rare 3-litre V8. What else have we got under here that's worth
So some of
pointing out?
the unusual things were the suspension setup, which was engineered by Chris Lawrence. That was his sort of race car engineering know-how went into it. So unusual, you got inboard springs.
Yeah.
Some of the other things, I like the fact on the engine as well, it has Monaca V8 rocker covers, and it shows that this wasn't sort of a project where they were just having a bit of fun. They were taking this seriously. This was intended to be a production vehicle, and I think it's a very much a what could have been. Whenever I see that, I think what could have been if Monaco had kept going.
Yeah, and actually, in some ways, I prefer the look of the first prototype to the later cars. It's a bit more distinctive. It's a bit Maserati Quattroporte Mark 1, really.
Yeah, it's definitely got its own look to it.
Yeah. So, okay, and then behind us, we're going to flip over to look at these engines now. So, don't go away. So it's not as though the 3 Monacas aren't pieces of history, but this is a proper piece of history.
Yes.
This isn't something you're going to find at the Bewley Auto Jumble. It's a Ted Martin V8.
Yes.
And we know that only maybe a couple of dozen Ted Martin V8s were made?
Yeah, again, like so many things with the Monaca project, it's very hard to sort of nail down numbers and quantities of things, but yeah, it was a very limited run no matter what.
And was this engine unique to the Monaca project?
So the Martin engine was used, it was available as an engine for people to buy as well. So there was some Ford Escort rally cars had it, there was the Pierce Martin Formula 1 car had it, all sorts of other small volume projects were trying to use it. The Monaca, I believe, was sort of the biggest consumer of it.
Okay, and it's a 3.5 litre.
Yeah.
So 3 litre in the first prototype, 3.5 in the second prototype.
Yep.
And this is being built for the second prototype.
This engine here is destined to go in car number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's special about this engine, apart from its rarity, in terms of its design? It obviously looks pretty damn sexy, but what's special about it?
So the thing that always stands out to me the most on this is it's got a very unusual conrod setup, connecting rod setup. So you've got a fork and blade style. So one conrod goes inside the other one. It's not. It's unusual, but not especially, unheard of. It's very good in that it balances forces on the crank. The downside to it is there's more components. It's more complicated to manufacture, to assemble, more bearings, etc. So that's why it's not used that often. But again, it shows how Monaca and Martin were treated this as a serious project.
Yeah, they weren't trying to do everything the cheapest they possibly could. Maybe they should have done it a little bit more cheaply, because maybe they might have survived.
Well, that's where Monaca did it in the end, and they moved over and they stopped using this engine and they moved over to this engine behind us here.
Okay, and this, so it's a Chrysler V8.
Yes.
But it's to a particular spec.
Yeah. So this particular engine was one of the batch of engines that was built for Monaca when they first started using those Chrysler engines. And yeah, we came across it, as you do sometimes come across these things, and when we found the history of it, we had to have it and join the collection. It's not right for any of our cars, but it helps tell the Monaca story.
Well, it would be right if you bought a later car. Yeah. So I think you need to just add to your collection. And,
yeah, you keep saying that.
Buy one or two. So yeah, okay. Yeah. So the construction of the car is fairly conventional, albeit it's got fuel tanks in the sill.
Yeah, there's a fuel tank in each sill, kind of a steel box section tubular chassis. Chris Lawrence was, famous more for Deep Sanderson and the Morgan Speed Race at Le Mans, and he had done all that engineering work. So it's very much a sports car under the bodywork here.
Okay, so you said it's a runner. It's actually not quite a runner, is it? You've still got a little bit of work to do before you get it
We've
running.
had it up and running now on the road and done shakedowns with it.
Right.
But we kind of, just with it being such a specialist engine, we're very cautious with this car.
And what's still to do on it?
It's some of the final little tweaks and engine bay tidying up, and it's going through and recommissioning some of the basic stuff, the brakes and gearbox. It was really get the engine happy.
Yeah.
And then we'll get everything else done.
Okay. Well, I rather like the look of these wheels. What are they taken from?
So they're J.A. Pierce wheels, and they were a supplier of sort of accessories and various things back in the 60s. And they also did experiment with Formula One, and they made a Pierce Martin Formula One car, which used the Martin engine.
Right,
Ended up in the moniker, yeah.
Okay.
And instantly, talking about the design of this car in particular, it's unusual in that it wasn't especially well designed. It's more just they had to get bodywork over this chassis to get some miles on it and get the prototype on the road. Yeah,
a very functional design and very functional bodywork.
Yeah, and it doesn't really share anything with the production styling in any way.
It's just impressive that everything is made of steel, and you think they might have just done a quick, glass fibre bonnet just for the test mule, but clearly they went way above and beyond.
Exactly.
Right, okay, so this is prototype number 1, and in a moment we're going to take a look at prototype number 2, which is already looking radically different.
Yes.
So okay, we'll see you at prototype number 2. So here we are at prototype number 2, completely different from prototype number 1, and of course the irony is that in the background we've got no fewer than 4 Facel Vega excellences. So although there was no link between the two companies, that was kind of the predecessor to this car. So picking up where Facel Vega left off was Jean Tastevin's Monique organisation. This looks radically different from the first prototype. Is it just the looks, or how else does it differ?
So it's predominantly the looks. Mechanically, it's very, very similar. It has a slightly larger version of the Ted Martin V8 engine, so 3.5 litre in this compared to 3 litre in prototype number 1. This also was the first car to be called a Monica.
Right.
Prototype 1 never carried Monica badging or the name. It was always it was a Deep Sanderson really at that point, which was Chris Lawrence's company. I have seen car number 2 here badged as both a Deep Sanderson and as a Monica, and I've seen both cars carrying the same number plate in period. So again, there's inconsistencies with the Monica story.
Yeah, I mean, there is a book on the Monica. I don't know how readily available it is, probably not at all. But you look through there and it contradicts itself, doesn't it? On one page it's saying something about one of these cars, and on another page it has a different fact, a contradictory fact about the same car. So trying to pin down the history of these is pretty much impossible,
it really is, yeah.
What about interior design?
So again, because these were prototypes, that wasn't really the focus or the purpose of these two cars. These were really built to carry a few people and get them testing the cars, get miles on them. So where number 1 has sort of, again, parts bin, special interior, Humber seats and a variety of Lucas switchgear, number 2 has BMW seats and some other switchgear. It looks better than number 1, but again, it's still not quite to the production car standard or style.
On that note, have you seen one of the later Monicas, a production car, a customer car? Mm-hmm. I haven't.
I've seen one.
What's the quality like?
I think what happens with them is they get very good restorations.
Yeah.
And they're probably better than they ever were. Yeah.
I think that's probably the case. Okay, so we've got a very different interior on that car, but still not the final production interior. A very different look, still not the final production.
And this sort of unusual paint colour combination is correct. It's what we see in the historic photos of this car, that it was this sort of two-tone grey and maroony red.
And on this one we've got more generic wheels.
Yeah.
So not nearly as sexy as on there. Okay, and then we've got twin filler tanks, because we still have
those twin in-sill fuel tanks. Yeah.
And what's the capacity of the fuel tanks?
I think they're 55 litres a side.
So 110 litres of fuel. You wouldn't want to be T-boned, would you?
No, definitely
one
not.
Of these. And did the twin sill-mounted fuel tank survive right through to the production car? Do you know?
I don't actually know.
You don't know?
The later cars, there were so many changes on them, I don't know if that one made it through.
Yeah, because we're going to look at car number 6 in a moment, and it was never finished by the factory, but even car number 6, it's still a prototype, it's still a car that was made before the car had made its debut in Paris, so there's still a long way to go.
Yes.
So we'll see you at car number 6. So here we are at car number 6.
Yes.
Still prototype stage.
Yes.
Not a production car yet, but looking much more like the production car.
Yes.
How does this differ from car number 2? And bearing in mind that there were 3 cars between that one and this one, at what point did we make the leap from there to here?
So car number 3 was basically the first car that had the production styling, and that car was it was built by Vignale and actually the body buck had been made by Henri Chaperon. So, you know, I think when you're getting those 2 names involved, you are serious about design. Cars 4, 5, 6, 7, this is obviously one of those, were then based on that design, and they were the first production styled cars. Aluminium bodied, still plan to use the Martin engine, but very much sort of a final design had been accomplished with these.
So we've got more of a production interior, more of a production exterior.
Yeah.
Still essentially the same mechanicals.
Yes. So at this point, the plan was for Monica still to use that Ted Martin engine. Again, it'd been evolving over time as they were doing development work on the car. This car in particular is sitting on a smaller set of wheels than it should be, just for display purposes at the moment. So it does look a little bit odd. They're very inboard at the moment, but basically it was the final evolution of these Martin engine cars.
Okay, so this car was made when?
71-ish.
Okay.
The body shell was done. Car number 4 was finished around that time. This car, was never finished, and the reason for that was the Martin engine was not something they could put into production, and Jean Tastevin made the decision that they were going to use the Chrysler V8 instead.
So this is still aluminium bodied?
Yes.
But they went to steel?
Steel for the later production cars, so after these sort of car number 7, I think, was the final alley car.
Okay, so this is the end of aluminium production pretty much. But this is still another year before the car would be shown, make its public debut at the Paris Salon in October 1972.
Yeah.
Okay. So this car number 6, was the last before car number 7, which was the Monica that made its debut at the October 72 Paris Salon.
Yes.
That was a Monica 350, was a Ted Martin 3.5 litre V8. But within 6 months, the Monica 560 was unveiled at the Geneva Salon in spring 73. So we went from a Monica 350 to a Monica 560 in 6 months. So what's all that about?
So that kind of explains why this car was never finished. The 350, as you said, is the Ted Martin 3.5 litre engine. The 560 is the Chrysler engine Monica, and it refers to the capacity of that engine. You'll also see later references to a Monica 590. The Chrysler engine is slightly large capacity. That was all happening late 72. So while they did announce the 350 with the Martin engine, they had pretty much already decided they were going to swap over to Chrysler. This car was fully set up for the Martin engine. They just never finished it. They moved on with other prototypes.
Okay, and so throughout 73 and 74, customer cars were made, about 10 supposedly, and the car continued to be shown at motor shows, but by February 75, Jean Tastevin had decided to pull the plug. Yeah. The money just wasn't there. With the oil crisis in full swing, no money to be made, he decided he'd had enough. So February 75, the plug is pulled on the Monica project. Panther West Winds step into the frame briefly and decide they might want to buy it, might want to take it over, but they don't. And then that's it. It's all over.
That's it.
By which point, around 35 cars made, supposedly. Do we know how many survived?
I've seen numbers sort of 10 to 20, but again, it goes back to there's so many inconsistencies with numbers of chassis numbers and number plates. Who knows, really? Who knows how many were built? Who knows how many survive?
So bearing in mind you have prototype 1, prototype 2, which are very different from the later cars, and then you've got this unfinished project, which is kind of the missing link. Are you on the case of a finished production car to add that to the collection, make it 4 Monicas?
No, we're always on the lookout for other things. I won't say no anyway.
Right, well there you are. If you just happen to have a finished production Monica up and running in your garage and you don't know what to do with it, I think down at the Isle of Man Motor Museum might be interested to hear from you.